Do you ever blame yourself for an event that didn't have the outcome you'd hoped for? Do you often put yourself down because you made a mistake? Do you negatively compare yourself with others? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. These are common examples of negative thoughts that people experience on a daily basis. An important question to ask, though, is why are these thoughts so common? Research shows that people pay more attention to, learn from, and make decisions from negative events and experiences than positive ones. And for good reason. If something harmed us in the past, we're unlikely to repeat the experience as we'd want to avoid the pain. So it's clear that these negative thoughts are common because negativity is an important factor when weighing up decisions. Though issues arise when our minds only see the negative. This can be problematic as you're not judging the situation in its entirety, which may cause poor decision making for starters. When someone increasingly focuses on negativity over the long term, it can have damaging effects on the mind and body, as we'll discuss later on. But why do our minds only see the negative, even in a relatively good situation where there's no threat or pain involved? So what causes this to happen? One of the reasons is that the mind is wired to have a more negative outlook in life is because of a term called negativity bias. So you might be asking, what is negativity bias? Well, negative experiences have a greater effect on us than neutral or positive things. This means that we have a tendency to give more importance to those negative experiences, even if they're insignificant. This is what we call negativity bias. And because we give this importance to negativity, studies show that for every upsetting event, thought, and feeling that we experience, we need at least 5 positives to balance it out. To get an understanding of the bias, let's look at how it occurs. Sophie is having a great time on the beach. Suddenly, she accidentally bumps into a stranger. The stranger makes an offensive comment and starts an argument with Sophie. After the incident, Sophie finds herself constantly thinking back over the stranger's words for the rest of the day, not being able to enjoy her day trip. Later, when she goes back into work, a colleague asks her how her day trip was. She replied, "It was terrible," even though it was actually good despite that one negative incident. The negativity bias is our tendency not only to register negative experiences more readily, but also to dwell on these events. People tend to recall insults better than praise, think about negative things more frequently than positive ones, and respond more strongly to negative events than to equally positive ones. You may be thinking, why do we have this bias in the first place? It's just highlighting all the negative things in my life. According to psychologist Rick Hansen, a negativity bias has been built into our brains based on millions of years of evolution when it comes to dealing with threats. Our ancestors had to live in difficult environments. They had to gather food whilst avoiding deadly obstacles. Noticing, reacting to, and remembering predators and natural hazards, negative, became more important than finding food itself, positive. Those who avoided the negative situations lived on to pass on their genes. While this is a great survival mechanism for someone who needs to stay hypervigilant in a dangerous environment, the truth is that for most of us, this negativity bias is counterproductive, because instead of being in an environment where we're avoiding deadly obstacles, our greatest daily challenges are projects and meetings whilst at work. To a certain degree then, this bias doesn't really serve us as well as it used to. What I mean by this is that our negative bias means that we're spending too much time ruminating over the minor frustrations that we experience, whether that's bad traffic or disagreement with a loved one, and ignore the many chances we have to experience in gratitude or happiness throughout the day. So despite knowing of the negativity bias, why is the first thought we have negative, and why is it a difficult habit to get out of? One phrase that may be responsible for this is synapses fire together, wire together. Steve Parton, an author and student of human nature, published an article that appeared on Inc.com that discusses the science behind why we have negative thoughts in the first place. Parton explains, whenever you have a thought, an electrical charge is triggered. The two synapses grow closer together in order to decrease the distance the charge has to cross, therefore rewiring the brain's circuitry, making it easier for that thought to trigger. But having that thought makes it easier for you to have that thought again. That's not great news for those people who are constantly thinking negative thoughts. Not only do repeated negative thoughts make it easier to think yet more negative thoughts, they also make it more likely that negative thoughts will just occur to you just randomly walking down the street. Another way to put this is that being consistently negative starts to push your personality towards the negative. Through repetition of thoughts such as, "No one cares about me, I'm not good enough, I'm so disappointed within myself," you've brought the pair of synapses that represents your negative tendencies closer and closer together. And when the moment arises for you to form a thought, the thought that wins is the one that has the least distance to travel, the one that will create a bridge between the synapses the fastest. For a person who has chosen negative thoughts above any other, negativity beats positivity. Not only does the bias and your mind have an influence on your negative thoughts, but your environment also plays a part. You wouldn't be surprised if I told you hanging out with negative people can actually affect how happy or sad you are. I bet you can think of a person in your life who is constantly negative and drains your positive energy too. A study has actually backed this up. In 2008, psychologists at Harvard University integrated the link between emotional states and relationships. The researchers found that not only does negativity spread much faster than positivity, but negative people have a far greater impact on our mood and mindset than positive people do. The study concluded that happy people can increase our chances of being happy by 11%, but if we spend time with negative people, our chances of being unhappy double to 22%. So spending time with negative people can be the fastest way to ruin a good mood. Parton unravels the science behind this. When we see someone experiencing an emotion, be it anger, sadness, or happiness, our brain tries out that same emotion to imagine what the other person is going through. And it does this by attempting to fire the same synapses in your own brain so you can attempt to relate to the emotion you're observing. This is basically empathy. In the company of good friends and family, it can be shared happiness, but spending time amongst negative people, it can cause shared misery. Along with people in your life, there may be more subtle external influences that you should focus your attention on that could encourage negative thinking. With everything going on in the world, some may be spending hours a day trying to update themselves on the latest news. Unfortunately, a lot of news that we consume today isn't so much reporting as it is a way of keeping people addicted to the news cycle, says psychologist Dr. Logan Jones. Unsurprisingly, to keep us addicted, the media chooses more often than not to put out negative news due to our negativity bias. This is where news companies can take advantage of our collective hunger to hear and remember bad news. This means our attention is more likely to be fixed on whatever they're showing, but this isn't doing us any favors. The impacts of negative news is highlighted in a study conducted by Psychology Today, who wanted to see the effects of positive and negative news. It was concluded that those who watched the negative news all reported being significantly more anxious and sadder in comparison to those who watched either positive or neutral news. Although there are benefits to negativity, such as understanding when something is a threat to our lives or to avoid pain, you may be thinking, what is the big deal? Negativity helps avoid those threats and dangers. While it's true negativity in moderation is useful, but the fact that we have the negativity bias built into our brains, it's a whole lot easier to think and focus on the negative, even if we don't have to. The result in constant negative thinking can profoundly affect your mental and physical health. In Scott Halford's book, Activate Your Brain, he states encouraging more negative thoughts leads to subsequent stress. When we're stressed, we produce a hormone called cortisol. Though in some ways stress is good for us, making you more alert and focused, however, cortisol has the effect of shutting down the higher cognitive parts of our brain, such as the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of logic, problem solving, empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. The reason why cortisol leads to the deactivation of the prefrontal cortex along with those feelings is because when we're stressed, the brain redirects our resources to the more primitive part of our brain, known as the survival brain or the fight or flight mode, which enables us to do one of those two things. This is great if you are in real danger, for example, running out from a burning building. But regularly being in the fight or flight mode is not what our bodies are designed to do. That mode is only required in moments of life-threatening emergencies. The fight or flight mode was formed as a part of our evolutionary process, which proved invaluable when dealing with threats millions of years ago. Fortunately, in today's world, real danger is few and far between, but that doesn't mean that we've lost the ability to trigger the fight or flight response. Due to the unique way of how our body works, it can't differentiate the stress that comes from real danger versus stress when you're thinking about that big web presentation you have tomorrow. This means that continuous negativity can have detrimental effects on our physical health over the long term. According to Mark Medical, common effects of negativity over the long term include headache, chest pain, upset stomach, drastic changes in metabolism, i.e. overeating or undereating, fatigue, sleep problems, social withdrawal, anxiety, and depression. And there's more. Health.com and Medical News Today show studies that people with high levels of negativity are more likely to suffer from brain diseases like dementia and stroke, as well as heart problems, digestive issues, decreases the immune system's ability to fight inflammation, lowers life expectancy, and recovers from sickness much slower than those with a positive mindset. This is also why negative people are more likely to get sicker than optimists. This leads me on to my final point. In many studies, one being Martin R.A.'s Cognitive Distortions, Humor Styles, and Depression, show that depression is actually a result of habitual negative thoughts. This is very important because people with depression are at a higher risk for a range of other health issues. According to a 2018 report from Blue Cross and Blue Shield, people diagnosed with severe depression are twice as likely to suffer from one or more chronic diseases, 3 times as likely to suffer from pain-related disorders and injuries, and 7 times as likely to suffer from alcohol or substance use disorders, when compared with people who do not have major depression. The study also reported major depression diagnosis is growing quickly, especially for adolescents and millennials, with depression rates peaking between 16 to 19-year-olds, followed by 20 to 25-year-olds. This shows that we need to take better care of our mental health so we can have happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. Stay tuned where I discuss solutions on how to overcome negativity in my next video. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.